Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. On June 8, 2020, the National Bureau of Economic Research declared that the US was officially in a recession starting from February this year. In fact, this declaration is usually done after 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. Nevertheless, the National Bureau already declared it before that in light of the current situation, the crisis, the fact that the economies were completely shut down, and they already announced it on June 8, 2020. Actually, during the first quarter of 2020, the decrease in the GDP was of 5%, with the pandemic, the current pandemic we are living, only starting to have an impact towards the end of the quarter. For this reason, experts were expecting a more than 50% drop in GDP for the second quarter results, and this article that I'm referring to was published on June 8, 2020. Nevertheless, the actual results of the second quarter of this 2020 will not be officially published until later on this summer. For now, based on the first estimate that was published on July 30, 2020, the decrease has been of 32.9%. Which, although it might not seem as bad as it was expected, it is definitely not good. And I just took the example of the US economy since it is the largest one in the world and one of the most affected by the current pandemic. But to be honest, we could translate these same results to any other advanced economies, for instance here in Europe. Nevertheless, we are currently facing a recession which could potentially be one of the worst in recent history. Seeing all of this, in this video I will be sharing with you which actions can you take in order to be prepared for a crisis no matter what. And if you enjoyed the video, then please make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more things about investing, personal finance, and so on. In any case, the key to everything relies in the fixed costs. And in order to illustrate how can you prepare your personal economy for situations like this, I will compare it with companies. Because at the end of the day, your personal economy is, in essence, not so different from a company's one. Let's go to the stock market, for instance. The tourism sector has been one of the most affected, if not the most affected, by the current crisis. There are others that have also been hit hard, such as, for instance, the financials or gas companies. But to me, tourism has been the one that has been hit the hardest. While banks and gas companies still have some kind of demand, the tourism sector has been completely shut down since economies have closed their borders and nobody is traveling at the moment. In the region of Spain I come from, half of the hotels are currently still closed, us being in the middle of the summer, which technically should be very high season. And not only that, but they are also having occupancies, those that are open, of less than 50%. And that's not it, because according to Hostel Tour, which is a magazine specialized in travel and tourism news, closing the summer with a 40% occupancy rate in hotels in Spain would be extremely good, since the current forecasts are forecasting around 35% occupancy for the summer period. And seeing the figures, the question is, which hotels will be doing better? Those that are open with such low occupancies, or those that are closed? To be honest, seeing the current scenario, most probably those that are closed. The reason for that is that the fixed costs of having the hotel closed are much lower than having it open. You of course still have some costs, but they are lower. On the other hand, having the hotel open implies that you need to have all your facilities running, you need to hire staff, which is one of the highest costs within the hotel and tourism industry. You also need to have your facilities running, maintenance done, the swimming pools, for instance, open in case you have some. And this is only worth it for a hotel if it has occupancies of, I would say, at least 60%. Since for a hotel, it doesn't make much difference once it is open, whether it has 30% occupancy or 70% occupancy. Of course, you might need to have a few more staff hired if you are having 70% occupancy versus 30%, but in essence, the variable cost of selling each additional room is very small, since the majority of the costs of a hotel are fixed. And I know that occupancy is not the only metric, since we should also take into consideration the price that people are paying to stay in each room, because if they are paying a higher price, maybe of course you can have lower occupancy. But in any case, I'm fearing that hotels will be losing a lot of money this summer. And I think that this very long example leads perfectly into how this translates into your personal economy and the actions that you should take in order to always be safe and prepared for any upcoming crisis. The key, as I already mentioned before, are the fixed costs. In the hotel industry, the hotels that will probably do better will be those that have lower fixed costs. Because in a scenario in which no revenues are coming in or very little revenues, it is super important to be able to preserve as much capital as possible in order to keep running the business in the long term. The same situation could be applied to airlines, which are also having major problems. For instance, Delta Airlines, which is one of the biggest airlines in the US, is burning $60 million in cash every single day since the pandemic started just to be able to stay afloat. Instead, Southwest Airlines, which is not as big as Delta Airlines, is only burning $30 million in cash every single day. Although Delta has more cash, since it is bigger, it is also burning double the cash. And in a situation, as I just mentioned, in which no revenues come in or very little revenues, Southwest Airlines are doing much better. In fact, an estimate published on April this year, based on cash and not counting government aids, said that Delta only had money to last 6.2 more months, and Southwest instead could last for 9.4 months. Of course, all of these airlines are currently backed up by the US economy, so in theory, all of them should be able to survive since the US economy will be putting more and more money in order to make sure that all of these companies stay afloat. But in a normal situation in which the government would not step in, Southwest Airlines would have many more chances of surviving this crisis. The conclusion we can extract from all of these comparisons is that in order to make sure that you are better prepared or that your personal economy is better prepared for a crisis, you should make sure to reduce as low as possible your fixed costs, such as for instance the apartment you rent, your car, among others. The lower these fixed costs are, the longer you will be able to survive in case you lose your job or you have no income for several months. Not only that, but you should only take debt if it is to finance an investment that will generate you more money in the future through leverage. And even in this case, you should be careful. And lastly, you should have an emergency fund that can cover you for at least 6 months of the current lifestyle that you are living. As always, and as I always say, reducing expenses is super important, but it should also be as important for you to try to find different sources of income and not be relying on one single one, which in most of the cases of the current population is a job. Because then, in case you lose your job, you are left with nothing. While if you have several sources of income, if one goes away, you still have the others to back you up. In the end, I think that none of the recommendations I said would be something very new for you, but I just feel that many people don't have this in their heads when making day-to-day decisions, and then whenever a crisis comes up, they get caught up. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed the comparison between one's personal economy and that of a company, and that it made you reflect like it did to me. In any case, thank you very much for watching the video till the end. If you enjoyed it, then please make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you are not yet subscribed, and see you next time.